Hello, and thanks for grabbing the hand building kit from Throw Clay LA. I am going to run you through the steps to make a simple cylinder form. Something that looks kind of like this, with a bottom on it. What we've got here in the kit are tools. We've got a wooden roller. We've got two square dowels that we're gonna measure the depth with, metal rib, a sculpting tool, wood tool here, wire brush, a needle tool, slip, which is really wet clay, a paintbrush, a ruler, a slab mat as well. I've got some texturing things over here and a little dental floss, which is going to get us started. Take out some dental floss here, and I am going to use it to slice off section of clay. Try and make it even, just so you're able to see what I've got here. I'm working with a section of clay that is about 4.5 inches by 3.5 inches by not quite an inch thick. Not super important that you are any exact size right now. All right. So now what I'm gonna do before I use a slab mat is I'm gonna just warm this clay up a little bit. Throw it down, throw it down. And if I throw it down at an angle back towards me, what that does is you can see it starts to elongate the clay. After you've got it in a rectangular form like this, just give it a couple pats. Just make sure that you don't get the clay thinner than your dowels. What I'm gonna do now is bring back the slab mat, rest the clay on the slab mat, and if I notice I've still got quite a bit of height to my clay compared to the wooden dowel, maybe I'll just smack it down a little bit more, flip it and smack it. The closer you can get the clay to the right height, the easier it is. That's pretty good. Now I'm gonna take the roller, start in the middle and push away, come back to the middle and pull towards. Again, again. And it's gonna take several rolls, but you should be able to get that clay rolled out to the thickness of the square dowels. I'm using nice long strokes with my entire forearm. It gives me steady pressure, as firm as I can give it. All right. Now, from this piece of clay that I've just rolled out, what I'm gonna do I'm gonna take it off the mat here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to slice off the end of it just a bit. And I'm gonna set this aside for later. Say that's, I don't know, 4 inches. We've got about 4 inches on every side. Recenter this. And if it's gotten a little out of whack, that's all right. You can just give a nice light pressure to it there. Very, very light pressure without the dowels. And now to get rid of these marks here, start with a blank piece of clay. You can use this kidney-shaped rib. These metal ribs come in different shapes. What you want to do is use the curved side at a very low angle, so not up here like this, very low angle, and just rub the clay. You're like petting the clay with this metal rib. And what that does is it smooths out the surface for you. And if you'd like, you can do the same thing to the other side. One of these sides will be the inside of your pot. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark off the bottom of my pot. Before I do that, to give you an idea of what size of piece we're going for, I'm just going to use this as an example. I've got a cup here, and if I take my dental floss and I measure the length of that dental floss, holding it up to the ruler, it's 9 or so inches. So that's, you know, I've got enough clay to make something this wide, almost this tall. I'm gonna line up the ruler close to the bottom, not all the way to the bottom, because I would be limited if I went all the way down here to a width of right here. If I go up just a little bit, my width, which is this, can increase. Now what I'm gonna do is very gently, very, very gently trace along the ruler with the needle tool. I mean very gently, like so gently. From there, what you're gonna do is, forget that second line I just made, I'm gonna measure up, and I'm gonna make this piece 4 1/4 inches. And what I'm gonna do is, from 4 1/4 to the top, I'm just gonna make a little dash along the top of the ruler, 4 1/4 on the other side, a little dash, lining up the dashes. Another very lightly traced line. Now we know we've got a parallel lines to the bottom and the top. If you're doing some sort of a design where the circumference margins are important, say you were to write someone's name in it, or, you know, hello, if you wanted to write hello in your clay, you'd want to make sure that, you know, you end and begin your clay here instead of all the way over here, because you get hello, or you don't want to cut it off in the middle. It's easy to sort of get carried away with your design and then realize, oh, I need to cut some of it away. So just be conscious of your margins if your margins are important. What I'm going to do now is texture. This is the more creative side of this whole project. If you're a minimalist, you can leave your clay just like this and do nothing. If you want to get creative a little bit, maybe search around your house and find a few things. I just found a drill bit, a piece of string, a leaf, and some coffee beans. What you can do with these, for example, and anything, really anything in your house can produce texture if you press it into the clay. This drill bit, I'm just gonna roll it along and it leaves an imprint. That's gonna do interesting things when it comes to glazing. If I push this rope down into the clay, it leaves an imprint. I can push the leaf in. To do that, I'd probably bring the roller back just to make sure I get all that vascularity pressed into the clay. Those are different ways to texture, but what I'm gonna do, I just found some coffee beans, and I'm gonna say, hey, this is something that I want to put coffee in. So I'm going to lightly press a few coffee beans into the surface. And one's gonna fly solo over there. Okay. Now, I do not want to push these coffee beans too hard into the clay, because the clay that we're working with, it's not very thick. So if I were to put that in there and then press down really hard, or take the roller to it or whatever and press it in there, by the time I was able to pop it out, it's not very thick right there. That's probably gonna crack. So just be cautious and make sure that whatever you're doing for your surface design, don't press into the clay more than about 1/3 of its depth. So I'm just gonna rock these back and forth a little bit, paying attention, don't want them to go too deep. And I'm gonna flick it out. Let you go. Rocking it back and forth. Want to make sure it's a full imprint, you know, but without pushing too hard into the clay, and flick them out. Away you go. Press and roll lightly, press and roll lightly. And get rid of them. Okay. Away you go. And I guess I'm just going to do one more right there because I made a little mark. No mistakes, just happy accidents, right? Or whatever you call them. All right, that's all I'm going to do for my surface design. If you see that you made something that you didn't like I had a little needle mark right there, you can be very, very gentle. And with that metal rib, try to smooth that back in. Again, it does not matter how much of a perfectionist you are or not, but just so you know, you can tidy things up a little bit if you feel as though you did something you want to take back. All right, you can do as much or as little surface design as you want. That's where I'm going to stop for today. And now let's start to make some cuts. First two cuts are easy because we've already traced them off. So I'm going to line my ruler back up with what will be the bottom, and I'm going to make a straight cut. Any clay that comes off during the course you're making your piece, put it back in the plastic. That way it's not going to dry out. If the clay dries out too much, then you can't reuse it. You have to wedge it, and you need to come into the studio to do that. So try to keep your clay moist. And I'm going to line up with the other line, the parallel line, and I'm going to do another vertical cut, straight up and down. So by that, I mean straight up and down like that. I'm not sort of going like this as I'm coming back like that. So those two cuts were vertical. We've got the bottom and the top of the cup. Now we need to make the sides. And remember that cup that I had before was about 9 inches. So I've got a little bit more than that here. I am not going to be exact. If you want to make 4 cups that are exactly the same size, then go ahead and make your even measurements. But this is a one-off, and I am going to go freeform here. I'm going to line up the top of the ruler with the top of the piece. That way I know this is a 90-degree angle. And whereas before I went straight up and down, what we're going to do here is we're going to cut at a beveled 45-degree angle. So notice the tool here. I'm staying with pressure against the ruler as I go through. Right at the end, you want to try to protect the exit. It can want to stretch the clay there a little bit. So by leaving your finger there, helps to not stretch out the clay. Now, if I were to go straight over here to do the other side and do the same thing, these bevels would not line up. So here's really the most complicated part of this whole thing, is the end over end flip. We've made our first beveled cut. Now we need to pick the clay up and flip it end over end, like that, right? I'm gonna do that one more time. Here's the clay, that's the cut we just made. I'm gonna pick up the left side of it, flip it over, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing, lining up the ruler so that it is perpendicular to the top. The needle is going to cut at a 45-degree angle. I'm going to protect the exit, set the clay aside in the plastic. Now what we need to do is wrap this around into a cylinder. Before we do that, we have to do what's called scoring and slipping. I'm going to take this wire brush and I'm going to rough up any portion that is going to make a connection. So both sides. I'll lift this up, get a close up here. Don't want to go too crazy, but you do want to rough that up. This just increases the surface area of the piece, which allows for a stronger connection. You can leave this on the ground, on the slab mat, or you can hold it. I'm holding it here just to show you close up what's happening. Get a little slip over those score marks, both sides. Now, I'm going to wrap it around and join the seams. Where you join them, you want to have a slight overlap. So you have slightly overlapped right there. Work half of it, flip it over, work the other half. Slight overlap still. Now we need to work the seam together. So I want to apply pressure in this way as well as in this way. So I'm pressing in. I am being meticulous about going over every little square millimeter of the connection point here. Flipping it at the halfway point. I want to be meticulous. You want to apply steady pressure, but you don't want to apply so much pressure that it makes that joint thinner than the rest of the piece. Where it overlapped, it was a little thicker, right? So now you're applying just enough pressure to make the joint the same thickness as the rest of the piece. All right, so that is connected. And what we need to do now is reinforce that seam. This is great for two reasons. First, we have a seam. If you want to see that seam and keep that seam, that is okay. You will just take your wet finger to the inside, dipping my finger in just a little bit of water and marrying the seams, blending them together. Also want to do the top and the bottom. I am going to get rid of the seam on the outside. It's easier to do this with the piece standing up, so I'm going to do this. I was just doing it while I was holding it so you could see the action. Again, top and bottom. You can blend the high side a little bit over to the lower side. And then seal the deal. Again, I'm just holding it so you can see it. This is probably a step that's more easily done in this position down here. All right. Again, make sure it's connected, but if you apply too much pressure, you'll make it too thin, and if you apply too much water, you'll make it too wet, which in turn makes it too thin. So just enough water for your finger to keep sliding. Top and bottom. And now, if that wet finger cramped your style a little bit, you can bring metal rib back into the picture. And smooth that all back out again. Careful if you get a little dry clay on there, it can start to leave a print. So you'll see it if that happens. Just brush it off and keep going. All right, so that's a pretty good hidden connection. Not to be confused with a missed connection. I don't know what that was about. It's a movie, old movie called Missed Connections. All right, now what I'm gonna do is that clay that I set aside earlier, I'm gonna bring it back. It's the bottom, so it doesn't really matter, but if you wanna make it pretty, go ahead. And what we're gonna do is set our cylinder on top of the rest of the clay. You can always roll out some more clay if you need some more clay. And if you want it to be a circle, great. If you want it to be an oval, great. If it's an oval, you want the seam here on the long side. You don't want the seam there. That's gonna wanna tear apart. You can change your shapes at all. You can even square it off a little bit if you want to. But again, make sure that seam is on one of the less severe angles of the piece. I'm gonna try to just keep this circle. Get a couple fingers in there. If you need to use a tool to get in there, you can. Just kind of touch up the shape of the circle. And once you got, sorry if I'm in the way, it's difficult positioning here. Once you've got the shape that you want, take that needle tool and cut out the base. Nice straight up and down angle. Doesn't need to be angled at all. You can just kind of hug the piece all the way around and then exit. Wrap around, toss that in the bag. You're gonna remove it from the base, and now we're gonna score and slip the base. We're also gonna score and slip, of course, the other portion. Anything that connects. And then we slip. Do we slip both sides? Yes, we slip both sides. Set it back on. Make sure you line it up to the shape of the base. If it changed at all, you can just sort of correct the shape a bit. And then once you've got it in the correct position, a little more tap out there. Again, it's how meticulous do you want to be? It's totally up to you. In terms of the shaping, really the only important things are the seals. So you can be rough if you want, but with the seals, make sure that you're getting the two pieces you're connecting together. So I press down a little bit, picking up the piece, and I'm just gonna work, applying a little pressure down, with these hands pushing down just a little bit. Again, you don't want to change the shape of the piece, but I am taking my time, taking about a minute to go around the entire perimeter of the base here where it's connecting. A little tap, tap, tap pressure. And once you've worked your way around, you can go ahead, bring back the wet finger. Seal the deal. Now the inside, if I can't get my finger all the way down in there, you can take a brush with maybe just a little slip on it. It doesn't need to have too much slip. You can actually have a little water to it. And I'm just gonna brush around just enough so I can't really see that break in the clay where the two pieces are joined. Just sealing it around. Great. That's our cup. Now when it comes to the rim here, if it's something that you're gonna drink from, maybe you'll wanna take an extra second to make sure that rim is nice and smooth. Something that I like to do on my rims is do a little bevel. A little inward bevel. Might be easier to use this tool, I'm not sure. You can use a knife as well. This little inward bevel like this is nice to drink from. And I'm roughing it up a bit here, but now I will go back in, maybe find those rough again, if you're making a planter or something, maybe certain portions of this aren't going to be as important to you. You're certainly able to skip the more cosmetic steps if you'd like. Just the structural ones, make sure the scoring and the slipping, spending time to make sure that joint is fully connected. Make sure those steps are done thoroughly. So I tend to like a slightly rougher look. If you look at any sort of drinkware, dinnerware that I've done, definitely like the more rustic, rough around the edges look. What is going on? Okay. Skateboarder. Now, what I'm going to do, since this is a coffee cup of sorts, I'm going to take a little bit of that extra clay and I'm just going to fashion a simple handle. Small and simple. If you make your handle too big, it's not going to be able to really to support itself. So I'm going pretty small. And look, I'm just eyeballing this. You can get mathematically precise if you'd like. But that's my handle right there. A rectangle that I've eyeballed. I'm going to, when you attach the handle, don't do it right on the seam. You can do it close by. I like to do it just in front of the seam. And go ahead and shape your handle the way you want it. A lot of different ways to have your handle shaped. I think I'm gonna go just kind of standard like that. I'm gonna tap, tap, tap here, the top part of the handle. Tap, tap, tap. What that does is it just thickens it up just a bit right there, a little bit more. Gives it more surface to connect to. So I'm setting it there lightly. I'm gonna take the needle tool and just mark very gently right where those connection points are, just above both of them. And then where that connection is gonna happen, score it a bit, score it a bit, tiny bit of slip. Same thing to the handle. Little bit of slip. And now I'm going to lightly press it in. The bottom I'm going to flatten like that. Enough pressure to make sure that it's on there and it's not going to immediately come off. But you don't need to apply so much pressure that you're making the pot, your cup, any thinner, or you're squeezing the shape out of the handle. Apply just enough pressure to really feel them stick good. If you want to, any little striation marks there, you can take care of those with a wet finger. Touch up the side of your handle if you want. Make any other last minute changes. And once you're good, you like the little cup that you made, changing the under shape of that handle just a little bit. Kind of lifting that top part of the handle there. Striations can go away with a wet finger. Make your handle curved, make your handle perfectly straight. It's up to you. Any little, super fine finger marks or whatever, we can always do little last minute cosmetic things later. It's easier to touch up little fingerprints or rough edges when your piece is leather hard. It's like half dry. And we want the piece to dry slowly. We don't want to leave it out and walk away and just let it dry naturally. What we want to do is take some of the plastic and set your piece inside and just lightly cover it. You can have a little air coming to it, but you want to make sure the top is covered and most of it is covered. Like a little hole here, a little hole there. That'll allow it to start to dry slowly. After a couple of days, you can open it up and you'll notice that it's harder, it's firmer. You can do any of your minor touch-ups at that point. And you can also leave it out to fully dry. That's the basics of hand building. You can go bigger with more clay. Just if you go too much bigger, since these dowels are pretty thin, that piece is gonna get really flimsy for the width of it. So if you want to go much bigger than this, I would recommend getting maybe a couple of paint sticks or something that's just a little bit thicker than this so that you can roll out a slab that's a little bit thicker. But these dowels are going to do for anything this size, smaller, or even a little bit bigger than this. A little coffee cup with coffee beans pressed in it. The basics of hand building.